And welcome back to another Perspectives. And this one is a bit of a follow-on to the previous one about the metaverse and the metaforming. And in the previous video, I talked about how this concept of the metaverse, I mean, meta means beyond, like metaphysical, beyond the physical. And so they use this idea, this concept of like going beyond the limitations of where we are now. And this idea of the kind of virtual avatar body is almost a kind of corresponding to the ethereal or astral body. So it's a way that they've kind of hijacked certain memes and ideas and concepts around the so-called spiritual domain. And in a way, I want to take that further in the sense that they're hijacking not only some terms, but they're hijacking the whole consciousness movement in a way. And it's a form of mimicry. And I think it's a great error to believe or have the idea that the so-called consciousness movement, the human potential movement, the spiritual movement is totally separate from the physical world or the corrupt world, and that these things are the human potential movement is all good, and it's kind of separated and protected from the corrupt physical world and reality. That's not true, because I think it's more obvious now that a lot of this domain of the human development, human potential movement, and the spiritual, which we may call pseudo-spiritual now, the spiritual marketplace has been infiltrated and has been for some time. And I think that's becoming more obvious, especially in the last couple of decades, where there's been a whole growth in this human development commercial marketplace, and all this life coaching and all this kind of coming on the back end of the new age, and people are picking it up now. And this mimicry has infiltrated by pretending to be one of us, as they call it, or part of the movement. And it's very subtle and very sly in the fact that these terms do have a validity to them. When we talk about human resonance, vibration, human coherence, the coherence of the heart, the psyche, and these terms, they have a truth element to them, but they're being co-opted for taking people in a different direction, almost steering them like we say the wolf in sheep's clothing, in a kind of disguise. So now there are certain organizations, and you can generally tell when an organization becomes very big, very popular, very quickly, and seems to be well funded, then there's usually a very high potential for infiltration. Without naming names, there are certain coherence organizations, conscious evolution organizations with their television and channels, which, for my mind, have become infiltrated. And you see, some of these organizations, they're very cleverly mixing human development and coherence with technology, downloading apps, using apps, or even brain, let's say, wiring to create your biofeedback, to create your coherence. And all this is in the disguise of the human potential and developing your abilities and your capacities. But it's also a way to entrain people and get them accustomed to this integration with technology. So you could say it's a kind of sly transhumanism pathway, or even a kind of pseudo-spiritual transhumanism, whereby the goal or the framing, the context of this is to develop your human potential, but it also means that you're being mapped, integrated with technology and the technological, I was going to say partnering, but partnering sounds too equal. But it gets you used to having technology to regulate and monitor the human body and the human psyche and the human vibration. And again, it's going inward to take you out. So you need this biofeedback, you need this connection with technology to monitor you. So I think there's a lot of infiltration into what we would consider spiritual organizations. And this is obviously something to be aware of, because it can be a danger, because people are drawn into the spiritual marketplace or pseudo-spiritual marketplace, and everyone is longing for some type of development or betterment. But often you can distinguish and make discernment here, because if you really, a person who really wishes to make some kind of development, perceptive development, a development of your faculties, development of your cognition, and then it takes work. It takes, it takes work to go through a whole process of deconditioning, of inner observation and considering, and it cannot be given in a course. It cannot be given by just signing up for, some quick weekend retreat or mentoring. And this quick fix type of spiritual commercial marketplace is very much aligned also with this false promise of inner development. So you can see that there's a certain materialistic path which is co-opting and hijacking the path of inner development. And just as the metaverse and the meta, the beyond, is hijacking these memes of going beyond the material and not being materialistic, when in fact it's a deeper immersion and over-materializing of the material, as I mentioned in the last video, so too is this spiritual transhumanism falsely co-opting the path of inner development and trying to provide a product which is through you, in the place of real inner development or perceptive capacities or heightened awareness. Because, and this also goes towards what I mentioned in the metaverse talk, is that it actually goes more towards a synthetic consciousness. A consciousness which we are being accustomed to, a consciousness which then has an attachment to something outside of it, a physical, technological attachment. If you are only able to monitor your condition through biofeedback or through coherence apps or anything else plugged into your smart device, then that is more steering, for me, steering your ecosystem, your environment, into one that supports a synthetic consciousness rather than an organic consciousness, because you again are outsourcing some dependency onto this technology, and that in a way your organic path of evolvement is being co-opted down a different pathway, a pathway which ultimately will go towards a kind of tech ecosystem of transhumanism. And so yes, the human potential movement has been co-opted, which is why, and often, as I said, you can see this by the popularity of certain organizations or speakers, because they're allowed. What do I mean by that, allowed? Well, if something really was a threat, to the system or any system, then that threat has to be broken down. And we can see that today in the huge amount of censorship that we have. And as the saying goes, if you want to know who's in control, find out who you can't criticize. And so a lot of people and groups are being taken down because they are speaking about something which goes against the system. But on the other side, there's a lot of other groups, organizations, which are allowed or even promoted or even given platforms, events, high publicity and promotion. And if something really was criticizing the system or allowing a pathway or break out from the system, then would it really be promoted or allowed to promote itself? Would it be given or allowed to have such a following and such popularity and such publicity? Well, the answer quite clearly is no. So again, it makes us to be aware of certain high-profile organizations and groupings that seem to be talking about this is how to break out of your perceptual slumber and be aware, and raise your vibration, and the rest of it. But these are what I call the false exits. And just like any big building or hotel has a revolving door at the entrance, and I feel that this system has inbuilt revolving doors, whereby you think you're going out the exit door, but it just very cleverly swings you around, revolves you, and puts you back into the building, back into the system. And I think this is what the hijacking consciousness is all about, is mimicking the vocabulary of the potential movement and inner development, mimicking some of the memes and the frameworks. And people think that they're gaining knowledge to break out of this perceptual prison, and to gain insight into expanded reality. But they're being steered towards a false exit, and when they think they're leaving, they come straight back in. And that's why many people, it's a dangerous path, because if you think you're going out, you can actually feed your ego by feeling that you are breaking out, and then you are given the delusion that it's your choice to come back into the system to train others and help others to be released. What's actually happening is that people are being steered towards a false exit, a revolving door. They come back in the system and they help to play the game, because what they're peddling or what they're showing may be helpful to a certain degree, but it doesn't give all the tools, all the capacity to really perceive what's going on. And so you're not a threat to the system because you've been deactivated. Once a person feels that they know what's going on and that they're out of the game, they stop fighting it or looking for a way out. And so you've been, your threat mode has been deactivated, and the system is very happy to have you in the system, because you become what I would call an allowed anomaly. Now, the general normies, or the general people who work with consensus reality, they think these people are anomalies. They are teachers of whatever, teachers of consciousness, teachers of inner development or something. And they're eccentric, they behave a little weird or behave a little, different from everybody else and out of the system. But in fact, they don't have the power or the knowledge to correctly be out of the system or to be able to pass this knowledge to others. So they're not a threat. They're an anomaly to other people, but they're an allowed anomaly, because then it takes other people into the de-threat mode. Other people and groups are taken, and they are trained to have higher cognition and higher perception and higher inner abilities. But it's a false path, because it only goes to a certain stage and then no more. And then these people are no longer a threat to the system, because they feel that they're out of the game, and therefore they're no longer either struggling within the game or seeking further development. And so really anyone who thinks they're out of the game is actually still in the game. Because if you were really out of the game, you wouldn't think or believe it. You would very clearly know it on a perceptive level beyond normal cognition. And also, you would not likely be talking about it. In my understanding and in my experience, those few people who really have transfigured and transformed themselves to have a perceptive ability beyond the current paradigm, the current system, you wouldn't recognize them if you met them on the street, because they're so normal, they blend into the game. If you think that once you're out of the game you can dress like you want to and be different and that, well, no, these aren't the real game changers. These are people playing the game still. And these false game changers, the people who have come back through the false exit, they're, like I say, allowed anomalies, and I also refer to them as auto-tranquilizers. If you go through this pseudo self-development, you auto-tranquilize yourself. You have a boost of a satisfaction. But that satisfaction then keeps you at that stage. And the person no longer has the urge to seek deeper, to seek further. So this again is a false exit. You've been given a little taste of what it's like to have a perceptive understanding outside of the system, just enough to keep you satisfied, but also not too much to take you genuinely out of the game. And so it's like a band-aid, like a plaster. If you have a wound, you put a plaster on and it stops the bleeding, but it doesn't really get to the heart of the wound. And so a lot of these hijacking consciousness infiltrations, they're just there to put a plaster band-aid on, whereby people feel the bleeding stop, but they haven't understood the source of the wound and how to heal it. Because any genuine path of inner development, it leads to a permanent transformation of the individual. Not a satisfaction on an emotional, mental level, not a temporary shift of the human condition, but a permanent transformation of the human being. And that transformation doesn't satisfy the ego. In fact, it lessens the ego. And so again, another mark of discernment is to see those people who are behaving in a way that they claim they have no ego, but they're still behaving from their personality, and less from a place of essential being. And again, ironically, in my limited experience, I've found that those people who are the most developed internally would come across as the most boring people. And I've always said, the more that you go through the path of inner transformation, you become more boring to yourself, because yourself is your personality. And when you start to move away from the personality ego into the being, then you have no need to, seem eccentric, or to want to seem to be different or an anomaly, or want to win over friends and influence people. In fact, you wish to be not attract people through your personality, because it's a false attraction. And so again, as I said, hijacking consciousness, those people who operate more through a kind of personality, fame, branding, they brand their identity, they brand their organization. This is further and further away from the essential self. And these people are more likely to be targeted by the system, to be infiltrated, and part of the hijacking consciousness. So it's just one of the things I wanted to talk about, to follow on from the previous talk. And thanks for listening thus far. Until next time. Cheers.